So Gunvolt 1 came and went, and it did alright for Inti Creates. It didn't do incredible, but it did start to build up a fanbase. So in 2016, its sequel hit the Nintendo eShop with Azure Striker Gunvolt 2. And this time, following his blue bomber cousin, a second playable character was added in this outing in the form of Copen. Now slightly less tryhard than he was before. But funny enough, Copen was originally going to be the only playable character, and it would have Gunvolt as the antagonist instead. Gunvolt would maybe be playable later on, like after the main campaign, but that just seems odd. But the other notable thing about it is that it actually does have amiibo support with the Shovel Knight amiibo. It works in the Switch version as well, thankfully, and yes, I know my amiibo is a gaudy gold, but I don't care, it's the only one I could get. But don't worry, you're not really missing that much other than extra boss fight. It's not required at all. Now last time I thought Gunvolt 1 was good, but it had a few snags, especially near the end, that would cause it to not quite stick the landing. But does the sequel polish those up and become a great game with it? Let's find out. So some time has passed since the end of the first game, with the beginning of this game having GV and Muse raiding a ship owned by the last few survivors of the Sumeragi group. Meanwhile, Copen from the first game arrives looking for his younger sister Mithril. GV manages to save her, but the two are ambushed by Zonda returning from the first game. What is that? What is that? Okay, Zonda did actually have that in their sprite in the first game, but I only noticed it here and... I wish I could go back to not saying it. Anyway, they lead a new group of badass known as Seven who want to create their own utopia, which in these kind of stories I think you know means genocide. And Zonda ends up becoming a small girl when their whole power is love. But getting away from that, they end up trapping Jewel in a shard and shattering her. GV manages to get Jewel to come back, but she's severely weakened. Copen manages to get a shard and escape, and his little robot companion ends up getting powers very similar to Jewel. The two go on their own paths to take out Seven for different reasons, crossing times over and over again, and that's about it. And I gotta say, I'm not big on this plot either. Maybe it's because I had a feeling it was going to be similar this time, but I just found myself not getting into it even more. Especially with GV, because he's just kinda going through the motions at this point. Copen at least has his sister he's trying to protect, so there is something there, but that's really kind of just the first game again, honestly. Look, if I'm playing Gunvolt, it's not for the plot, let's put it like that. I'd also like to note that this game really assumes you played the first game, because it barely explains anything on what's going on, so if you have the Striker Pack, definitely play through 1 before playing 2, just as a heads up. Gunvolt 2 is very visually similar to the first game. I'd say it honestly looks on par, but for the cutscenes there are much more drawings to show certain story beats, and I enjoy these just like the first game. Also, there are several character portraits that help show different emotions, which helps a lot. Soundtrack, I'd say, is on par with the first game, with the Muse tracks easily being the best ones by far, but the rest is just alright. It's nothing that I can really remember outside the game that much. And sadly, once again, no English dub, so only Japanese voice acting, which still works, but I can't really enjoy the dialogue inside the levels themselves yet again. And I didn't find the performances as over the top this time, which I feel like was part of the charm of the original game. In terms of character designs, I do really like a lot of these, but I did notice that everyone felt a bit younger this time. And I'm not talking just about the Muses. I feel like everyone doesn't feel as old, and I kinda split on that. While I do like Copen's more simplified look, I feel like something was missing with GV's design. And it's kinda like that for a lot of them. And that also goes for the scripts. Some I think got really great dialogue, but some characters got on my nerves really quick and had dialogue that already felt dated. One thing I do think that Gunvolt 2 has over the original is that boss attacks feel like they have much more pizzazz and feel more like super moves than last time, despite the bosses feeling a lot easier. So Gunvolt 2's presentation is about the same, but is that true gameplay-wise? So Gunvolt 2 gameplay-wise is the same structure as the first game. Pick a stage, blast through it as fast as possible, taking out anyone in your way, and defeat the boss at the end. Not much change there, and honestly for GV, they barely changed anything about him, as his gameplay and options are nearly identical. So I don't think we really need to cover him again. However, we do have a new kid on the block in the form of Copen, who plays completely different. His gameplay revolves around dashing into enemies, which is how you tag them, and then your shots will home in on that target. He can dash forward and at a 45-degree angle, and he has a mid-air hover, making his gameplay all about dashing and not hitting the ground to get the highest combo. Just know that you can't dash if the bullets on the bottom are gone, so keep that in mind. He also has two separate super meters, one for a full health heal, and the other is a screen clearing super. Now, unlike Gunvolt, Copen does have a bit of a Mega Man effect on him, where he gains a new sub-weapon for every boss he defeats, and they are the actual attacks that the bosses use. They can be like a giant drill, crystal, or my personal favorite, the one that lets you zap health from an enemy and take it as your own. And bosses do have different weaknesses like Mega Man as well. The campaign is split between the two heroes, but you only play through 4 main stages, with you having to fight the 3 remaining members in the final stage. There are still challenges for each level, synthesizing, getting revived at the last minute, that's all here. Though when you beat the game, you will gain time attack and score attack modes. Also, the green gems from the first game are now removed, and in order to get the true ending, you just need to beat both scenarios. Also, because I kind of forgot to mention it last time, there is a system in the game known as kudos. Pretty much you have 3 settings where it affects the score multiplier. Higher difficulties mean higher multipliers, but less hits until the combo resets. It's more of a replay value thing if you're shooting to clear missions and such. And that about does it for the changes in Gunvolt 2. So what did this game improve upon? The good in Gunvolt 2, well first off, the game control-wise is as tight as ever and the pace of the game is still great, and pretty much everything that made the first game great is here and accounted for, including the boss fights. While I don't find them quite as memorable, I do think the best 2 are easily Gabriel and Zonda's final form. Gabriel's phases each feel like big changes, from going from projectiles and medieval weapons, to busting out Wolverine claws, to making it a cage match, and sending spikes towards you. She was a great fight. And final Zonda ends up using the powers from each of the adepts in the game in interesting ways, so it makes it a really cool note to end the game on, and a much better final boss than the first game by far. And GV is as solid as he was last time, but Copen stands on his own and I didn't feel like he was a replacement or anything like that. It did take a little bit to get the hang of him, but I really dug his movement options and keeping the combo going with him feels great. Plus, I really enjoy him having multiple weapons to work with, and I feel like he did more damage overall than Gunvolt, but he had less defensive options to make up for it. The 2 work off each other really well, and they're both totally worth a playthrough. And thankfully, without the green gems, the final ending is not a hassle to get this time, and hey, you can actually skip the credits this time! Writing this section for the review was kind of odd, because mostly everything that was good about the first Gunvolt applies here. But unfortunately, that's kinda true on the other side of the coin. So let's first cover some of the carryover problems from last time. First off, synthesis is the exact same and not improved. Though I did find this game a bit easier overall, so I had a better time getting materials, since it's easier to get ranks on your first run. But I was still swimming in money, but I couldn't use it on anything because I lacked the materials. And makes it luck on the draw if you can even get these on your first run without grinding. Challenges got a slight improvement as you no longer need to select which ones you want to do, as they're all active at once, but they still only go live per se after clearing the stage your first time. In the second to final level, I got an A first try, but now I need to replay the level again and get a B rank. I did better than that, so why doesn't it count? I could maybe go easier on this in the first game, but this is a sequel, and at this point it just feels intentional and not a design choice I agree with. And while I do see the requirements for the true ending of Plus this time, the overall removal of the green gems does have a side effect on the game. It wasn't so much the idea of them I had a problem with, it was more the talking to Jewel, get the necklace, and then she's taken away, and the fire stage were the big issues. Without the green gems this time, there wasn't much incentive to explore the levels, since all you could really find was a medal and that's about it. So most of the time I was just blazing through the stages even faster than normal, but that also made them less memorable and doesn't allow for certain level gimmicks to shine. Copen especially emphasizes this with his dashing, as you can just zip right past them without the gimmick even affecting you. But the game in general I did feel like was a lesser scope, honestly. Each campaign only lasts a little under 2 hours, and each character goes through less stages than the original game. I couldn't help but notice the game was going by way too fast, and I really think having it so each character played through every stage might have helped with this. It did feel like corners had to be cut in order to include Copen. By the end of this one, I wasn't really frustrated like I was with Gunvolt 1's ending. It was more like, oh well, that was a thing. Honestly, the biggest issue with Gunvolt 2 is that it feels so identical to the first game, which means if you like that game, you'll like this one. If you didn't like the first one, this one isn't gonna change your mind. Gunvolt 2 is still a solid platformer with high-speed action that fans of this genre will enjoy. Copen being added is a great addition to the game, and it's easier to recommend this along with the first game in the Striker pack. However, this pack I feel also just highlights how similar these two games are, and you really notice it when you're playing them back to back. They have a lot of the same strengths but a lot of the same weaknesses. Give it a few years and I feel like I'll have a hard time remembering which game was which. I can't help but feel a little disappointed that only the small stuff got fixed while bigger issues still remain like the challenge and synthesis systems, and the small nature of the game is very noticeable. I think I ended up preferring the first one slightly because I felt like it was a bit more well-rounded. While Gunvolt 2 I think is still good, I think it fails as a sequel and feels more like DLC to the first game rather than a full-out new game. It's good, don't get me wrong, but it feels like it needs just a bit more. That might have sounded a bit more negative than I intended, but it's so similar to the first game that makes it hard to really talk about much new. But if you want to try the series out, the Striker Pack is the way to go as you get both games together in HD. Now there is one more game in the series right now, so let's hit that up while we're at it. So next time we're taking a look at Gunvolt Chronicles Luminous Avenger. I'll see you then.